Okay, Crim 5, let's knock out Chapter 2, Police Role Concept in a Changing Society. So, as you can imagine, even over the past, even over the past year, how much has society changed? I feel like, excuse me, almost every day, certainly over the past year, every day you turn on the news and something new and insane is happening and unexpected, and that involves our health, medicine, race relations, police relations, politics, pretty much anything. And we've almost gotten to the point, at least in my opinion, where every day you turn on the news and it's something happens that you never in a million would have expected could have possibly happened in your lifetime. So, changing society, yes. So, police roles. Think about what you expect from the police. What do you expect from the police? And does your opinion of what you expect from the police change given different circumstances? Given who you are in given circumstances. Okay, so say you're driving down the street. Let's say this. Say you're walking across the street and some person goes speeding by at some ridiculous speed and they almost hit you. Where the heck are the cops, right? Where are the cops when someone's driving like an idiot and they could have hurt you, right? Or you're walking across the street with your little kid and there's somebody driving recklessly and you're like, where the heck are the police, right? That's one perspective. What if you're driving fast somewhere and the police pull you over? And you think to yourself, don't they have something better to do? Okay? Do you get what I'm saying here? Different perspectives. Your idea of what the police should be doing can change based on your perspective at that very moment even. I want police to catch people who are speeding and driving like maniacs. But do I speed sometimes? Yeah. Do I want them to catch me? No. You get what I'm saying, I hope. Our perspectives and what we expect from police it depends on who we are. It depends on where we are. It depends on many different things. So, we all have different roles in society as well. Your roles right now might be different today than they were a year ago. They might be different today than they will be in 10 years. I used to be in your role. I used to be a college student. I'm now in a different role. I'm in a different role today than I was 10 years ago. I was in law enforcement / corrections 10 years ago. Was my role different then than it is now? Did society look at me different when I was a probation officer than they do now as a college professor? Is my role different when I'm a mom? Okay, so again, I'm kind of throwing all this vague stuff at you, but I want you to get how perspective and how you think about things changes, number one, your perspective about roles, and number two, your idea about what you think people should behave like. Okay, and we all do have different roles, and people see us differently. There are a lot of times when I'll do things like drop an F-bomb in class. And people will look at me and think, oh my gosh, she's a college professor. She's not supposed to be saying that. That is not in my description of her role. She shouldn't do that. It's not professional, right? Others of you will say, well, she's a human being. And sometimes that helps her get her point across. It's okay for her to do that. It just depends on how you see things. Anyways, so roles, we all have different roles. One person plays many roles. Sometimes those roles conflict. Sometimes I'm a mom. Sometimes I'm a wife. Sometimes I'm a college professor. Sometimes I'm a friend. Sometimes I'm a daughter. Sometimes I'm a caretaker. You have many different roles as well. So some of those roles conflict as well. Anyways, being a police officer makes all this stuff about 1,000,000 times more complicated, because your role as a police officer sometimes supersedes all of your other roles. Whew, am I talking in circles here? Okay, so there are certain roles that are ascribed that you have no control over. Your book uses these as examples. Okay, male, female, young, old. Let's go with young and old, okay? Because those two are not things that you can change. When you're young, your role is that of a young person, period. You don't have any control over that. When you are a wife, you do have control over that. You've chosen to get married. So that is an achieved or attained voluntarily role. So these are two different types of roles that a person can have. One is something that you have no control over, ascribed, and one is one that you do have control over, achieved. Okay? Police officers must be all things to all people. Think about that. All things to all people. They have to save everybody. They have to fix everything. They have to be on their best behavior at all times. They basically have to be perfect. Correct? Yeah. See, this is so much easier when we're in class together, right? My lectures are always easier when we're in class together. But yeah, police officers are expected to be perfect. They really are. And people don't understand sometimes that police officers are people. And it's sometimes really hard for a police officer to be all things to all people. The only all-purpose emergency service in society. Any kind of emergency, police officers are called to. A medical emergency, a fire emergency. If there were, if a bomb got dropped in your backyard tomorrow, who would you call? You'd call the police. If there was a weather emergency, who would you call? You'd call the police. We call the police for everything. And they're supposed to be these superheroes that immediately know how to take care of everything. A lot of these are young people like you. You got to be typically 21 years old. But think, 21 years old. Are you prepared to be an expert at everything and know how to handle all situations at 21? I am not 21. I am much older than 21, and I can tell you right now I don't know how to handle all situations. So, again, those are huge expectations that are placed on the shoulders of police officers. So they enforce laws, maintain order, resolve disputes. They have to be fair, and no matter what type of horrible verbal and physical abuse is directed toward them. And I can tell you, even as a probation officer, I was called every imaginable name that you could think of by people I had never seen before in my life, simply because I had a badge on. If you get offended by that, and you want to walk up to someone and punch them in the face because they called you an offensive word, and again, trust me, I got called everything imaginable. I don't care. It didn't bother me. It can't bother me. You can't let it bother you. Otherwise, you drive yourself insane. Crazy. You like that? I just made up a new word. You'll drive yourself crazy. Drive yourself insane. And you can't do the job if you let that stuff get to you, because it basically will eat at you every day. I would drive into certain neighborhoods and immediately people would just stop and flip me off, cuss at me, yell at me. These are people I didn't know. I wasn't looking for them. It just had nothing to, all it had to do with was the fact that I had a badge on. I worked at an elementary school. I walked onto campus, and I saw a little boy in the hallway, just walking down the hallway, and he stops and he says, "Look, there's a pig," pointing at me. Okay? Which of course was funny, but I tried not to laugh because he was a little kid, and he truly, that was really his idea of what, and I was, again, I'm only a probation officer at that point. So, no matter what, you as a police officer are expected to respond in a professional manner, no matter what. Must never violate an offender's rights, must be professional and detached from violence and tragedy. All these horrific things that police officers see on a daily basis, stabbings, horrific abuse, child abuse, rape, torture, horrific violence. They have to be detached and professional. They have to be honest and fair, and always appear to be honest and fair. Not only be honest and fair, but absolutely positively appear to be honest and fair at all times too. They have to know every law imaginable and be prepared to manage conflicts and deal swiftly and appropriately with basically any kind of crisis that has ever taken place in society. Okay? Sound like an easy job? Right. Okay. Perception. It is more than receiving visual stimulation or sensing something. It's a process of creating meaning out of what we see, smell, hear, taste, feel, all that kind of stuff. Using senses to perceive the world. It's very unlikely that two people, given any time and place, will perceive the same event in the same way. And this is very true. I was out somewhere. I was with a friend just the other day. We observed the same scenario go down in front of us. It was some kind of an altercation of some sort. We both went back and discussed it, and my perception and this other my friend's perspective was completely different. And so it's very interesting. And if you notice this with your friends, family, stuff like that, if even watching TV, you might watch a TV show and say, that's not really what I got out of that. You'll notice that that's very, very common. Perception is personal. You'll see and understand and feel things in a different way. Police officers know that eyewitnesses are very unreliable and inaccurate because of perception. We all have different past experiences that make us perceive things differently. And judgment. Our judgment is different. Everybody has different judgment, and that can definitely impact our perception. And I probably just said basically all this kind of stuff. Relatively stable, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm going to kind of skip that. How do we perceive things? Basically, a lot of our past experiences will help us to perceive things. They will help us to kind of come up with a vision in our own minds of how things work and how we see the world, how we make sense of things. We also are very good at generalizing things, which is not necessarily a good thing. Now, it can be a lot of times when we generalize, it leaves room for biases. But it also can, in some instances, I'm not saying it's a positive thing, but it tends to serve as a protective factor. If you're walking in a neighborhood and it's you know how sometimes you go a certain place and you just feel a vibe like something is not right here. It's a protective factor. Sometimes it can be a negative thing because maybe you have a bias of some sort, but sometimes it can be a positive thing in that it's a protective factor. So let's not go too deep into that. We are selective and pay attention to certain things and not to others. We also are good at filtering out things that we don't want to see. We distort things. This is also something I think that we maybe use as a protective factor to keep from remembering things that we don't want to think of. Again, we're still kind of talking about rules. I'm going to sort of skip over that. Objectivity requires that the observer determine, study, and weigh facts. We want observers to be objective. Let me go back, not subjective, as we see here. Objective When a person is objective, they're going to be more concerned with facts. When they are subjective, they are going to be more concerned with their own biases and feelings. I don't know. Does that make sense? So being objective is typically a better way to be. We want people to be objective. We want them to look at facts and information and evidence and data as opposed to just going with a gut feeling, which is typically what being subjective is. Police officers' roles: crime control. We expect them to control crime. We expect them to maintain order and keep peace. We expect them to serve. Again, I'm not going to read all these to you because I know you can read this. There are tons of other roles. And I would say the vast majority of work that police officers do during, maybe an 8-hour shift, the vast majority of the work they do is not in crime control. They are not responding to criminal behaviors. They're responding to calls for service. My neighbor's dog is barking. I need to transfer custody of my child, things like that. So a lot of their work is not spent in actual crime control. I remember working for the Madera Police Department as a dispatcher for a little under a year. I got so many 911 calls about there's a dead possum in my front yard. I had a lady there's a live skunk in my backyard. I had 911 calls asking me what time it was. You name it, I had 911 emergency calls for it. So a lot of the stuff that police officers are called for service to do are not necessarily these emergency criminal calls. So anyways, let's see what else. There's also different types of police officers as they have kind of been defined. You've got, and all of them at some point in time end up putting one of these kinds of hats on, as they say. They have to control crime. That's part of their job. But there are many times when police officers end up being kind of like a social worker because, maybe a child has been left at home, or maybe both parents are getting arrested. They can't just leave the kid there. They have to end up being more like a social worker. They have to care for the kid until CPS can come out. Sometimes they're called because there's a young kid whose parents can't control their behavior and they have to come out and lecture the kid. There are many times when, as opposed to being a pure crime fighter, they end up doing some more social work type of things. They are tasked with crime control. They are sometimes the kind of officers that will contact people, tell them to abide the law or obey the law and have them move on without necessarily arresting them. There are enforcers who see themselves as protecting the good people from the bad people. Idealists who are professionals who better serve the public. The realists who seek transfers and assignments where they can hide out. These are your burnouts. And unfortunately, think about working as a police officer for 20 years, 30 years, 25 years. That also unfortunately happens. And then optimists who see themselves in a public, in a positive manner. I think many officers, when they first start with the police agency, are super excited to be there. A lot of them want to change the world. A lot of them want to go and arrest all the bad guys and clean up the streets and make a difference. And unfortunately, little by little, a lot of them will realize that it's not that easy. And then things like COVID-19 hit, and the jails are forced to release criminals that the officer just spent 8 hours arresting, and 20 minutes later, the criminal is back out on the streets. That can also be very frustrating for an officer. There are some different perceptions among the community with police officers. Some people love police. Some people see them as a necessary evil, and some people hate the police. There are a few different ways that police can handle a call for service. What's not listed on here is, police just don't respond at all. This one is how police respond, it says, but I'm sure we live in Fresno, pretty big city, a lot of crime, and some of you probably reported a crime and not had police come out at all, unfortunately. But sometimes the problem is confronted and solved. Sometimes the problem is confronted, not solved, and sometimes it's not confronted at all. And sometimes the officers don't respond at all. Does the media have any impact on our ideas, thoughts, perceptions about police and our expectations about the police? And obviously, I don't think I need to even kind of answer that question for you. And I'm going to guess that based on discussion question number 1, you can already see that the media absolutely positively does have an impact on our perception of the police. And I'm pretty sure, I'm thinking our first reaction paper that we will do is going to be a really interesting one. I'm going to show you 2 videos that will depict basically the same story. One will be a media version, and one will be the police department's version of the exact same story. And I'm going to have you analyze it and look at it and see how different you think the story is as told by the media, as opposed to the body cam video of what actually happened. And I think you're going to see some interesting things that might make you say, for those of you that remember, what's his name? Arsenio Hall? Arsenio Hall, I'm that old. This was like in the 1990s. He was like a talk show host, and he would always have this segment called Things That Make You Go, Arsenio Hall, Things That Make You Go, I'm going to have you watch these 2 versions basically of the same story, and you're going to see a difference, a very different story as told by the news outlet and as told by the body cam video. So anyways, there's some stereotypes as created and perpetuated by the media. The buffoon, dullards, sadists. These all sound really positive, don't they? Hero, wizard, harassed professional. So as again, you can hear all of these have negative connotations, and these are all concepts made up by the media I should say wizard and hero. Those aren't bad. I shouldn't say that. Hero and wizard doesn't sound that bad. In fact, those actually sound kind of good. So the media has an interesting spin on law enforcement. So we'll talk about that at length in this class. And reassessing the dimensions. Should people, is obeying the law a good thing or a bad thing? and I don't have to read this to you. You can read it. We are in a world of infinite choices, and social media has really, really, really changed a lot. But certainly the perception of police. And it's really, I think it's brought a lot of light to some bad behavior committed by police as well. So please don't think that I'm saying that all police are wonderful, because police officers have now, a lot of their bad behavior has been brought to light by the media. So it's definitely been an eye-opener. So it's definitely encouraged some better behavior on their part as well. So life is already being changed by these new technologies. The body cam cameras are definitely things that are a tool that should be helping police. They don't necessarily all see it that way. Ethical problems must be confronted. There's all kinds of technology is really a blessing and a curse. And you can read that. And I think we're just about done. Officers need better training, and they need to learn to work better with the community. And we are going to talk a lot about that throughout this class. This is really sad, and we're going to talk a lot about this in this class too. Officers, unfortunately, become suspicious, isolated, and they form a solidarity between other officers, unfortunately, because they are so separated from the rest of society based on the view society has toward them. Distrust, distrust, distrust. Police officers are not immune to the situations they must face. They are influencers and controllers of these situations. Police officers sense that they are becoming withdrawn and distant because of these situations. Police officer is a citizen. Is a citizen's only contact with the law, and what the officer says, thinks, and does reflects on the total community. An essential element of the cooperation of police agency must constantly seek to improve is its ability to determine and the need and expectations of the public. Absolutely true. The police and the community absolutely need to learn to work better together. Both sides need to work better together.